Hi, I'm Therese. I walked into that family meeting thinking maybe this time they'd hear me out, but they didn't even save me a seat. No nameplate, no voice. Just polite smiles and blank stares. Then they asked me to sign over the rights to a company I built from nothing, under the assumption I'd stay quiet. But I didn't. They didn't know the empire they depended on was mine. Now their cards don't swipe. Their phones ring to silence, and I'm the ghost they can't ignore. Isn't it strange how a family can erase you, then panic when you finally disappear? The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of my home office in Wichita Falls, casting golden rectangles across the hardwood floor. It was the kind of quiet that made coffee taste richer. I was reviewing a portfolio update when the doorbell rang, a sound that had become more of a formality than a surprise. A delivery envelope sat on the front step, cream-colored and neatly sealed. No branding, no note, just my name in my mother's cursive, too formal for a daughter. Inside was a card printed on thick stock. Family Strategic Meeting. Your presence is requested. That phrase alone told me everything. Requested, not welcomed. Strategic, not sentimental. And for once, I was being included, officially. My family hadn't asked for my opinion since I was 23 and dared to suggest my father not pour his retirement into a failing restaurant franchise. Why now? I turned the card over twice, searching for some casual warmth, maybe a scrawled note. There was none. Just the details. A full-day meeting at the Quinlan estate next Saturday, dress business casual. My phone buzzed before I could sit down again. A text from my mother. Therese, be calm. Let your sister lead. Don't cause trouble this time. There it was, the real message behind the polished invitation. I set the phone down without replying. Years of polite exclusion now followed by a request for silence. I was always too much in that house, too blunt, too curious, too unwilling to play along. At Thanksgiving dinners, I was seated at the end, near the wall. I was asked to help with dishes, but never invited to share updates about my work. They called it tradition. I called it containment. Another buzz. This time, Valora. Hey babe, just a quick note. Don't go too bold with your outfit, okay? We're trying to keep everything clean and neutral. Don't want to outshine the partners. The partners. Valora's husband, I assumed. Or maybe her finance guy who once called my logistics strategy impressive for a boutique operation. Neutral, I muttered, meaning invisible, meaning muted enough not to disrupt the pageantry. I stared at the message, thumb hovering above the keyboard before locking the screen. No response, not yet. Let them think I'd come quietly, that I'd wear beige and smile, that I'd sit and nod like a museum artifact. Let them. They didn't know they were talking to the CEO of a $900 million enterprise. Because I never told them. The truth is, I'd built Blue Harbor quietly over 8 years. What began as a drop-shipping experiment in a Denver apartment bloomed into a multi-channel logistics brand with clients in 6 countries. I funded a network of fulfillment centers in states my family couldn't spell. My decision to keep it private wasn't about shame. It was survival. Peace more than pride. In our family, contribution meant little. Obedience. That's what got you a seat at the table. I opened my laptop and clicked through my asset firewall, just a precaution. My lawyer had insisted we conduct regular what-if audits. It had felt like overkill. Lately, it felt like insurance. I dialed her line. When she answered, I kept my voice steady. Could you double-check my personal firewall and flag any movement on the trust lines? She didn't ask why. She knew me well enough. Before ending the call, I slipped the folder marked "In Case of War" into my bag. Just habit, I told myself. I wasn't planning on needing it, but I wasn't walking in unarmed anymore. Later that evening, I stood in front of my closet, eyes scanning the rows of power suits and silk blouses. I reached for the navy one. Structured shoulders, tailored waist. It made me feel like glass and steel all at once. The kind of suit that didn't ask for respect. It took it. I held it up to the light and smiled to myself. They'd invited me to a meeting. But not into the family. I arrived 5 minutes early, not out of eagerness, habit, mostly. The Quinlan estate hadn't changed much. Same iron gate that squeaked a second too long. Same manicured hedges that looked more for show than shade. I parked near the side of the circular driveway, far enough from the others not to be blocked in. I didn't expect anyone to greet me. I was right. The staff barely acknowledged me. One of them, a woman who had worked there since Valora's wedding, gave me a brief nod and an empty smile before disappearing into the kitchen. Another walked past me without so much as a glance. I'd been away long enough that my face had become something between a stranger's and a memory best left unmentioned. Inside, the formal dining room had been reconfigured into what they must have thought looked like a strategic planning suite. Long rectangular table, assigned seats with nameplates and agendas. I scanned the room, not seeing mine. "Yours is over here, Mrs. Quinlan," one of the assistants said, gesturing toward the far end of the table, close to the double doors but distant from the projector screen and primary conversation zone. The seat was different. Lighter wood, no armrests. A blank card sat in front of it. No name. No title. No affiliation. It was clearly a placeholder. An afterthought. I ran a fingertip along the edge of the card, the kind they used at hotel banquets when someone canceled last minute. There was a pen next to it, as if I was supposed to fill in my own name. I didn't touch it. The empty label on that seat had more honesty than anything else in this room. Across the table, Valora stood in her sharp cream blazer, chatting with the estate lawyer like they were old friends. She hadn't even looked in my direction. "Therese?" a voice piped up. I turned. A child, maybe 6 or 7, with a juice box in one hand and her mother's phone in the other. "Who is she?" she asked, not whispering. Her mother, a cousin I barely recognized, looked horrified. "Oh, she used to live in Austin," she said, brushing it off like I was some former neighbor. "Not blood. Used to live in Austin." As if I'd vanished and reappeared with no roots. As if the girl hadn't worn the jacket I sent for her birthday 2 years ago. I smiled, small and contained, and took my seat without saying a word. From this angle, I could see the dynamic of the table clearly. Who leaned in, who laughed too loudly at Valora's jokes, who took notes when the lawyer spoke. The power lines were drawn in posture, not policy. My sister floated from group to group like a senator on campaign, controlling tone with gestures alone. She knew when to drop a name, when to shift her shoulders to bring someone in or keep them out. Across from her, the family's lawyer, Mr. Rudd, kept glancing toward her for cues. When I caught his eye, he blinked and immediately returned to his paperwork. They were rehearsing a play. One I had never been cast in. A chair scraped near me. Uncle Douglas, my mother's younger brother, sat down with a huff and nodded politely. "Didn't know you were coming," he said without looking up. I kept my voice calm. "Neither did most people, apparently." He chuckled awkwardly. "Well, at least you came to observe. Some roles don't require speaking." I nodded once, committing every word to memory. Valora called the meeting to order. Mr. Rudd opened his laptop. The agenda packets were handed out. Mine came without a staple. I flipped through it slowly. No mention of me, no references to any of my projects or contributions, not a single bullet point acknowledging I'd submitted a 5-page strategy memo 2 weeks earlier. Even the summary of past decisions, where my name should have been listed as a silent contributor, was scrubbed clean. They didn't forget me. They erased me. You'd think after so many years of being ignored, the sting would soften. But standing there at the end of that table, no name, no seat of consequence, it hit just the same. Worse, maybe, because I had grown enough to know it wasn't an accident. It was architectural, deliberate. The opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. I'd read that quote once during a long layover in Atlanta. It crawled into my bones then, but it didn't truly settle until now, as I sat quietly in a room full of relatives pretending I was part of the decor. I wasn't supposed to be invisible, but to them, I always had been, unless I was useful. A pair of hands to serve hors d'oeuvres at a bridal shower, a name they could drop when speaking of tech-savvy family members, as if I were a trivia fact, not a person with a voice. I watched as my brother, Lucas, stood up with a sheepish smile. He was talking about his new business venture, his second. The first had failed miserably 2 years ago. Most of the family didn't know why it hadn't folded completely. I did. I was the reason it didn't. I transferred $2 million anonymously when the company was on the brink. A bailout he thought came from a silent funder, some mysterious private capital. He'd never asked questions. The family assumed his turnaround was self-made, and he never corrected them. Now he beamed as everyone clapped politely, even Valora. My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue like she was watching a graduation speech. My father gave him a thumbs up. I felt my stomach twist. I didn't want applause, but I also didn't deserve erasure. When Lucas stepped down, I caught his eye. Just for a second, I wondered if he saw it, my knowing look. He gave me a half nod, casual, unbothered. Maybe he suspected. Maybe he didn't care. They didn't just forget. They rewrote history and ripped out my chapter. I drifted back to another memory, one that hadn't faded with time. Last year, I'd suggested integrating our logistics software, proprietary, adaptive, and worth millions, into the family's estate management systems. We could optimize inventory, streamline maintenance, even automate reports. I offered it free. My father barely looked up from his coffee. "You're good at what you do, honey," he said with that tight-lipped smile. "But this is grown-up territory." Grown-up territory. I remember standing in the doorway, folder in hand, while they chuckled about investments I knew were hemorrhaging cash. I had patents. They had nostalgia. And they still thought they held the keys. Sitting in that meeting now, I wondered how many times I'd let their ignorance slide for the sake of keeping peace. How many birthdays I'd attended with clenched teeth. How many calls I'd answered from mom that started with, "Your sister's had a hard day," and ended with, "Can you just wire her a little something to help?" Was that humility? Or fear? I used to believe my silence kept the peace, but silence doesn't protect. It erases. That's what they counted on, that I would keep my head down, that I'd quietly keep funding the gaps they never owned, that I'd stay in Austin, running my empire like a side project, while they played house with my resources. A tickle of heat ran up my spine, not rage, not even sadness. Clarity. I stood and excused myself to the restroom. It was just off the main hallway, lined with old family portraits, each one a study in curated joy. I passed one of Valora in her debutante dress. I remembered how she cried when her tiara wouldn't sit right that morning. I'd helped pin it in place. She never thanked me. Inside the powder room, I shut the door and leaned against the marble sink. The mirror showed a woman who didn't flinch anymore. I opened my bag and pulled out a folder. Simple manila. Black marker across the front. In case of war. I hadn't opened it since the day I packed it. Legal documents, backups of ownership claims, timeline spreadsheets, screenshots of wire transfers to family members who never knew the source. I had come to this meeting hoping not to use it, but maybe now I needed to be remembered. I pressed my hand to the folder for a beat, then slid it back into my bag. By the time I returned to the room, the presentation had moved on to strategic future investments. My chair was still nameless, but I wasn't. Let's see how they react when the invisible one starts speaking. When I returned to the room, it felt colder. Not the temperature, but the energy. The laughter had thinned, the pleasantries worn off like cheap perfume. What remained was the real meeting, the decisions that would shape this family's future, or erase mine from it altogether. I slid into my nameless chair. No one looked up. No one nodded. My absence during the break had been as unnoticed as my presence now. Valora stood at the front of the room, all confidence and calculated charisma. She didn't look at her notes as she clicked through a slide deck. Her voice carried with a politician's practiced ease. "As we move into the next phase of the legacy plan," she said, eyes scanning the crowd but never landing on me, "I want to thank those actively involved. Everyone here has played a role in shaping where we go next." Then she turned to me, just briefly, with that smile that doesn't touch the eyes. "And of course, we're grateful Therese came to observe, even if she's not directly involved anymore." A few people looked my way, offering tight-lipped smiles, unsure if they should clap or nod. I didn't blink. I didn't twitch. Inside, though, something curled. Not involved anymore. They didn't invite me. They summoned a ghost. A chair at the end of the table. No nameplate. No documents bearing my work. A silent, hollow placeholder for someone they hoped would stay quiet. And they were right. I had stayed quiet for too long. During the coffee break, I walked into the sunroom to get some air. That's when I felt a hand gently touch my arm. My mother, Eudora, wore her usual soft expression, the one that always masked something more clinical beneath. "You've always had your own world," she said quietly, not looking me in the eye. "Be grateful we still welcome you in ours." I stared at her for a long beat, unsure whether to laugh or recoil. "Is that what this is?" I asked, voice low. "A welcome?" She offered a smile that didn't apologize, didn't even recognize the insult embedded in her tone. "Sometimes peace is more important than pride," she replied before turning away. But I wasn't looking for peace, not anymore. Back at the table, I flipped through the meeting materials. Again, nothing with my name on it. No mention of the project I'd offered to contribute. No sign of the systems I'd designed that Valora had dismissed as not aligned with the family's vision. Just spreadsheets and timelines where my absence was now protocol. I didn't lash out. I cataloged. Every omission, every glance avoided, every passive dig. I began making mental lists of every clause in the family trust agreement, of every account tied to my shell companies, of every payment I'd routed discreetly to cover this family's inadequacies. I'd spent the last decade plugging their financial holes while they sewed up my existence. Let them believe I was small. Let them see only what they chose, because the thing about being invisible is, you get to watch everyone without them watching you. I observed Valora's performative charm, the way she addressed each elder by name, how she touched shoulders when delivering news that would benefit them. I watched our cousin's husband hang on her words like she'd solved world hunger. I saw the lawyer glance at her for nonverbal cues like he was waiting for stage directions. They were rehearsing a script. I wasn't in it. I used to beg for a role in their show. Now I'm building a stage of my own. The lunch spread was untouched in front of me, salad wilting on porcelain, iced tea sweating into a napkin I never unfolded. Around me, the buzz of discussion resumed, but none of it reached me, and then something clicked. Without a word, I pushed back my chair. The sound was sharp, metal against tile. Several heads turned, but no one said a word. No one asked where I was going. No one offered a "hold on" or "Therese, wait." Of course they didn't. I wasn't leaving the table. I was leaving the illusion. They can't see me. Fine. They'll feel me in the foundation. When I got back to my place, the air smelled like cedarwood and citrus, the diffuser still running from that morning. The silence wrapped around me, a familiar kind of solitude that didn't ask anything from me. I toed off my heels near the doorway and walked straight to the kitchen, pouring a glass of cold water and standing with my back against the counter. That meeting. The fake smiles, the polite erasure, the way they all nodded like I was a formality. I'd held my tongue. I'd walked out without slamming the door. But now, alone, I could feel the quiet rising in me like a tide. Not loud, not messy. They want a silent daughter. I'll give them a silent storm. I took my glass with me to the den and opened my laptop. The screen came to life, blinking through its two-step verification before revealing a dashboard most of them didn't know existed. Blue Harbor, holdings, trust accounts. Shell entities I'd built out of caution, now serving as a firewall between my family and their assumptions. My finger hovered over the lock button. And then, as if on cue, a message popped up. Valora. Hey, Therese. Dad was wondering if he could get the SUV back this week. He says he needs it for something with the church group. I stared at the screen, unmoving. The SUV. The one I bought 3 years ago and registered under a holding company they never traced. It had been my father's retirement gift, though he never asked where the funds came from. I gave it through an anonymous donor. Valora had arranged the delivery. Now he was requesting it back, like it had always been his. As if I was borrowing something they owned. They take my gifts like air, then claim the air as theirs. I opened a different tab. Vehicle assets. There it was, listed under Quinlan Mobility Fund, tagged discreetly with the family's driver profile. One click. Pause access. The screen refreshed. If fuel card, inactive. GPS, disconnected. Maintenance account, suspended. There was no confirmation pop-up, just a line of text. Action complete. They'll know I was there when their wheels stop moving. But this wasn't the moment to throw every card on the table. I closed that tab and went back to the main dashboard. Everything else remained untouched, for now. Don't strike first. Strike wisely. It was tempting to pull it all, but strategy wasn't about the loudest move. It was about the most unexpected one. The first glitch in the system. And I wanted them to feel it. I opened my email and started a new message. To Rachel, my assistant, former corporate auditor, current keeper of my real empire. Subject, summary requests. Time sensitive. Rachel, please begin compiling full transaction histories by individual. Anything tied to family trust subaccounts from 2018 onward. Focus on gifting patterns and interlinked shell usage. Bundle everything into PDF packets. Label each one with the primary beneficiary's name. Keep them locked, but ready. No revenge, just data, just clarity, just truth, ready when needed. I leaned back and stared out the window. Austin at night wasn't the same as Wichita Falls. It didn't carry the weight of obligation. It hummed with energy and choice. They had tried to fold me into a narrative I never agreed to star in. But they forgot I was writing my own script. And I had receipts. The most dangerous person isn't the one who yells. It's the one who listens, thinks, and then acts. Later that night, I was halfway through a glass of Barolo and reading the latest report from our fulfillment partners when my phone buzzed again. Valora. Hey, something weird's happening with Dad's car. He said the fuel card didn't work at the pump. Maybe something's wrong with the bank. I didn't reply. I flipped the phone over, face down, and let the screen go dark. They'll see the warning. Whether they read it is up to them. The second half of the meeting began without fanfare. No one asked where I'd gone during lunch. No one even glanced up as I slipped back into my seat, still marked by that empty name card. The air felt thicker than it had that morning. Valora's smile was tighter, her pacing quicker, and the family lawyer, Mr. Rudd, kept glancing at her like he needed permission to breathe. Whatever calm they'd faked earlier was cracking. Valora cleared her throat and clicked the next slide in the presentation. A wealth distribution chart blinked onto the screen, showing branches of assets and trust flows to different family members. Then my name flashed. It was there, just long enough for me to register it. And then it was gone. The text blurred slightly, flickered, then transitioned with a wipe animation into a new label. Inactive, transferred holdings. Like I'd died. Or never existed. A few heads turned subtly toward me. No one said a word. The silence didn't just cut. It suffocated. They made me vanish in real time. And Valora didn't flinch. She kept talking, her tone warm and practiced as she moved on to future planning and real estate transitions, like she hadn't just rewritten the family ledger mid-slide. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, not yet. Later, during a break, I wandered into the side office. It was the room my father once called his thinking space. The same place I'd sat cross-legged on the floor as a teenager while he taught me to balance a checkbook. Now it felt hollow, like the weight of honesty had long left it behind. A drawer was cracked open slightly. I didn't plan to snoop, but it was already open. That's what I told myself. Inside were folders, labeled, organized, color-coded. Rudd's system. I pulled one marked Will's Archive. Tucked in the back was a copy dated 8 months ago. Another marked only 6 weeks prior to this meeting. I opened the older one first. There I was, clear as day. Therese Rahl. Quinlan, co-beneficiary, designated partner for tech-related holdings tied to specific disbursements from a trust branch I'd partially funded myself. Then I flipped to the latest. My name was gone. No reassigned. No moved to separate entity. Just gone. They didn't just omit me, they deleted me. I stood there for a long moment, the folder open in my hands, and it wasn't the legal slight that burned. It was the personal one, the casual cruelty, the choice to pretend like I hadn't built any of it, that my effort, my strategy, my investment, all of it was disposable. Family loyalty ends when abuse begins. And this was financial abuse in a designer dress. I grabbed my phone, snapped a clean shot of each page from both versions, then quietly slipped the older will into my folder before closing the drawer just as I'd found it. Back in the corner of the room, I opened a secure app and drafted a message to my personal attorney. Subject: Prepare LT Timeline Package. Body: Found updated docs confirming asset exclusion. Include PDF, trust flow comparison, and timestamp trail. Flag inconsistencies across slides presented today. Do not escalate until instructed. I closed the app. Then, for the first time that day, I smiled. Not the polite smile I'd worn since breakfast. This was different, sharper, steadier. I wasn't asking for a seat anymore. I was building my own damn table. When I walked back into the meeting, no one noticed. I nodded at Mr. Rudd, who avoided my gaze. Valora glanced up, eyes flickering, then looked away. My mouth curved. They think I'm smiling. I'm baring teeth. By the time the final session resumed, the air in the room had shifted, just enough that someone paying attention would feel it. Valora was now in full performance mode, her tone crisp and calculated. She moved with the certainty of someone who believed the crown had already been placed on her head. "Let's move forward," she said, turning to Mr. Rudd, who nodded and pulled out another stack of printed folders. "These are acknowledgement documents for asset transition and leadership reallocation. Just formalities." One landed in front of me with a light tap. Valora didn't even glance as she slid it my way. "Just something to note for the record," she said, "acknowledging your awareness of the changes." I didn't open it right away. I watched her instead. She smoothed her jacket sleeve, took a measured sip from her water glass, and returned her gaze to the center of the room. Her confidence wasn't just in the content, it was in the assumption that I wouldn't challenge her. I opened the folder. My name was there, in small print, buried in a paragraph about relinquished claims and mutual consent. But what caught my eye was deeper in the language. A cross-reference to the tech infrastructure I'd built from the ground up. Blue Harbor's early modules, the warehouse automation scripts, the patented inventory optimization engine, all referenced as developed within collaborative family project parameters. I wasn't just being pushed out. They were trying to steal my work. They weren't just replacing me. They were taking what was mine. I looked up slowly and caught Valora's eye. She smiled again, this time tighter. "I assumed you'd be fine with it," she said, sweet as pie. "After all, you've always been more visionary than hands-on." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The silence between us said more than any courtroom testimony. Before I could close the folder, another voice broke through. "And now, please welcome Kayla, our strategic consultant." That name. I turned to see Kayla step forward in her sleek pantsuit, hair done in the same precise bun she wore when she was still my assistant. She smiled, nervous at first, but then steady, rehearsed. "I'm here to present the third phase of our digital rollout, which includes the logistics platform we've rebranded under Quinlan Future Holdings." I felt every muscle in my shoulders tighten. She clicked through slides showing my interface, my sequence, my flowcharts, slightly recolored but unmistakable. She was showcasing my work as theirs, and she'd done it well enough to pass. Valora clapped first, then the rest of the room followed. Kayla finished with a line I had written on a post-it note 3 years ago. "Efficiency isn't about speed, it's about invisibility." The knife twisted gently. They'd bought her, or maybe she'd sold herself. Stock options. Title. Access. The things I never needed, but they knew others craved. 2 women now sat at the center of a plan designed to erase me, one with blood, one with a price tag. I leaned back and pulled out my phone under the table. 2 M. Salgado, Legal Counsel. Subject, Clause C. Body, Trigger Full Lock. Include IP Protection Clause, Retroactive Claim, and Pre-Litigation Warning. Quiet Mode. Timestamp everything. I clicked Send. Let them feel powerful for 10 more minutes. I folded the folder closed, not bothering to tuck it back into the stack. My eyes moved across the room, at cousins who used to call me wild card like it was both insult and joke, at uncles who whispered about emotional ones whenever I dared question Valora's ideas. But they weren't laughing now. They were applauding theft wrapped in decorum. I wasn't the unstable one. I was just the unowned one. And I was done playing their roles. Valora slid a pen toward me, nodding toward the folder. "You'll just need to initial here." I looked at the pen, then I looked at her. I stood up instead. If I ever needed their approval, I thought, watching her try not to blink, that part of me just died. The room hadn't changed. Same table, same faces, same damn chair with no name. But when I stepped back into that space, something in me had. Something subtle, permanent. The old version of me might have tried to salvage the meeting. The woman who walked in now had nothing left to salvage. Valora stood at the front again, all poise and polish, the fake kind of confident, rehearsed, too clean to be human. "As we look forward," she said, fingers dancing along the edge of the table, "we must consider legacy not just as inheritance, but as intention. Leadership, after all, is stewardship." I raised my hand, calm, even. My voice carried clearly. "I'd like to make a brief comment on that point." She didn't miss a beat. "We've already heard from everyone contributing," she said with a forced smile. "Let's stay respectful of the agenda." There it was, the dismissal, dressed in politeness. Mr. Rudd coughed into his hand but said nothing. Across the room, Uncle Paul glanced at the floor. My mother studied her cuticles. My father didn't look up, just muttered, "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Harder? I sat back down, heart pounding like it had been caged for too long. I wasn't angry, not in the way they feared, no raised voice, no table pounding. But inside, something snapped. And they didn't hear it. They never heard anything unless it served them. 5 minutes later, a man I didn't recognize walked in. Navy jacket, no tie. He didn't make eye contact with anyone but Mr. Rudd, who gave him a slight nod. "Ms. Quinlan," the man said, quiet and professional. "We've been asked to escort you out. You're no longer a formal party to this meeting." Gasps scattered like broken glass. Cousins blinked. Valora didn't flinch. My mother sat still. She didn't object, didn't question, just watched. And that was worse than the silence. I stood, slow and deliberate, gathered my folder, adjusted the strap of my bag, looked around the room one final time, not searching for a lifeline, just recording faces. "You didn't just disinvite me," I said, steady as stone. "You declared me unnecessary." No one responded. No one moved. I turned, heels tapping clean against the tile, and walked out. The hallway smelled of citrus cleaner and stale ambition. The same staff who barely acknowledged me that morning watched from the sidelines. No one opened the door for me this time. I didn't need them to. I walked through the front door of the Quinlan estate and into the Texas heat. By the time I reached my car, the weight in my chest had dissolved into clarity. I opened the driver's side door, dropped my folder on the passenger seat, and powered up my laptop from the center console. No more meetings, no more begging, no more playing their game. I opened the Blue Harbor administrative backend and selected the top-level account, Quinlan Holdings, Internal Dependencies. Under Action, I clicked Enable Financial Revocation Protocol. A confirmation prompt blinked. I didn't hesitate. Yes. The dashboard refreshed. Red tags began appearing. Access revoked. Funds frozen. Auto-renewal disabled. Then I clicked again. Lock all assets linked to Quinlan accounts. The screen went still. Then, success. I closed the laptop, sat back, and exhaled. I gave them decades of patience, I whispered. Minutes of truth were too much for them. 10 minutes later, while I was halfway to the freeway, the first alert went out. Valora's assistant couldn't complete a wire transfer. Dad's grocery card was declined at the register. Lucas couldn't log into the shared investment portal. All across town, the machine they built on top of my empire started sputtering. Let's see how they run the empire without my empire. I woke up to the smell of cinnamon coffee and the dull pulse of my phone vibrating non-stop on the nightstand. I didn't rush to check it. Whatever was waiting could wait a few more minutes. When I finally picked it up, there were 36 missed calls. 12 texts, 6 voicemails, all from familiar names. Valora, Dad, Lucas, even my mother. I took my coffee out to the balcony. It was still early. Austin hadn't woken up yet. The air was clean, the sky still bruised with morning. I sat down, phone face down, and just listened to the hush. They finally felt what I'd been living for years, being cut off. I had felt this silence every Thanksgiving I spent alone. Every Sunday they shared updates in the group chat I wasn't part of. Every time they passed around stories at the dinner table and left me out like I'd been a bad memory. Now, the silence was theirs. By mid-morning, the rest of the plan unfolded. I'd timed everything. At exactly 9 o'clock a.m., every member tied to Quinlan accounts received the email. Subject line, clarification of ownership and access termination. No anger in the body. Just facts. Attached were documents they didn't expect me to have. Asset receipts, wire confirmations, contract timestamps. A timeline of how much I had given, how long I had been funding the life they thought came from luck or Dad's pension. Truth doesn't scream, it documents. By noon, I was already getting reports. Mom's utilities were auto-bounced. Lucas's business account was flagged for inconsistent source tracing. Valora's PAC fund froze mid-disbursement. The campaign accountant emailed her twice before realizing she wasn't listed as an authorized user anymore. I didn't lift a finger that morning. The system I built had already done its job. Dad called. I didn't answer. Valora texted, "We need to talk." I replied once, "This is me talking." Then I muted the thread. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even satisfied. What I felt was something quieter, like closing a door that had been half open and letting it latch completely. This wasn't about revenge, it was about drawing a line. I'd heard once, you are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm, and I had spent the better part of 2 decades doing just that, burning parts of myself down to keep the illusion of peace intact. Not anymore. There's power in not picking up the phone. Power in letting people sit with the consequences they created. Around 2 o'clock p.m., my attorney forwarded me a short message. Local media just requested a comment on the financial restructure. Your name's finally in the headline. I read the subject line twice before opening it. Quinlan Holdings shifts structure after quiet billionaire heiress withdraws support. Billionaire. I'd never used the word myself. But if that's what it took for them to see me, so be it. Now they remember me. Good. Let them. It started as a whisper. Not from anyone in my family, of course. They were too busy scrambling to make sense of the damage to say anything out loud. But the city talked. The industry noticed. And when local media picked it up, just a quiet sidebar piece on a weekday afternoon, the headline did exactly what I never needed applause to do. Quinlan Holdings, restructured after ownership dispute. No more footnotes. No more hiding behind phrases like family partner or contributor. My name was there, printed in bold. Not a footnote. Not a passing mention. A headline. I didn't forward the article to anyone. I didn't gloat. I just sat on my back patio in Austin, iced coffee in hand, watching the sunlight dance across the fence, and whispered to myself, I didn't need applause. I needed the record set straight. Later that afternoon, a friend from the Valley forwarded a photo from an industry conference in Dallas. Did you know Valora pitched this under a new name last year? She wrote, attaching the photo. There she was, standing on stage, presenting my tech as if it were a family innovation. The branding was different, cleaner, colder, but the framework was mine. Same interface logic, same core structure. But this time, it had no legs. The caption beneath the photo said everything. Funding retracted. Project paused indefinitely due to unresolved IP complications. They built nothing. They only stood on what I built, and without my foundation, the whole tower leaned. In the days that followed, I watched social media debates flare up. Didn't she fail last year? Wasn't Valora the one running it all? People questioned everything. I didn't engage, but I didn't need to. The documents I'd released spoke louder than any comment ever could. They began circulating quietly, screenshots, emails, transactional records, all dated, verified, undeniable. The silence that once erased me now unraveled them. Then came the smaller unravelings. Mom tried to refill a prescription. Her insurance card got declined. She called the helpline, then called me, twice. I didn't answer either time. The policy had been under a trust I managed. Emphasis on the past tense. Lucas sent me a carefully worded email. Hey, Therese, just wondering if there's a mix-up with Emma's education grant. It looks like the account is frozen? I replied once. The fund no longer recognizes your household. No sarcasm, no cruelty, just truth. I spent the next morning in meditation, not for peace, but for clarity. Austin was loud that day. Birds, cars, neighbors trimming trees. But inside, I was quieter than I'd been in years. They had screamed over me, around me, through me, and now they had to live with the echo. I picked up my phone and emailed Rachel, my assistant. Subject, Phase 2. Body, initiate quiet philanthropy. Focus, women-led startups. Keep my name off everything. Let them shine. The power I held now didn't need to be named. It didn't have to show up in press releases. It lived in movement, direct, invisible, relentless. Late that night, a new email came in. From Valora. Subject, we underestimated you, body, and we paid for it. I stared at the screen, the room dimly lit by nothing but the monitor glow. I didn't type back. I didn't forward it. I didn't even smirk. Instead, I whispered to myself, you didn't pay enough. The voicemail came at 8:17 a.m., time-stamped right between a news segment about the restructuring and a scheduled call from my accountant. It was from my mother. I listened to it once, then I listened again. Still, no apology, just that familiar soft tone, steeped in practiced concern. Therese, sweetheart, I don't know what's going on. This is confusing for everyone. We never meant for it to escalate. Maybe we all just need to sit down. No lawyers, no tech talk, just the family. Please don't do anything else permanent. Not a word of regret, just confusion. Just subtle blame wrapped in warm vowels. I deleted it before the message even finished playing. I used to wait for that voice. I used to keep it saved in my phone like a charm, like maybe hearing it would anchor me. Now I recognize the silence after it as a gift. By noon, a new email came in, not from her, but from the family's attorney. It was dressed in legal politeness, a request for a reconciliation meeting, phrased delicately as a collective effort toward emotional and financial recalibration. Collective effort, like we'd all had equal parts in the damage. I responded through my own counsel with a single line. Family isn't a transaction. I decline. Then I changed my number. I closed the mailbox tied to the old Quinlan Trust accounts, the one they all used to contact me when they needed help but didn't want anyone to know it was coming from me. I opened a new family trust. Quiet, private, not for them. This time, I decide who gets to call me family. Later that week, I drove out to where it all started. The childhood home, boarded up now, auction sticker still fluttering against the screen door. The lawn was patchy, the swing in the backyard rusted stiff. I stood at the edge of the yard and let the wind hit me full in the face. No nostalgia, no sorrow. Just a thought. It was never the house that failed me. It was the people in it. I walked the fence line once, touched the post I had painted when I was 9, still faintly blue beneath the dirt. Then I turned and left without looking back. 2 days later, I stepped into a different kind of house. Sleek, bright, filled with laptops and ambition. The startup incubator I'd quietly funded over the last year was now fully operational. The glass walls bore no name, but behind the front desk, a small plaque read, "Founded for the Uninvited." I met with a young founder that morning, 27, underfunded, underestimated. I handed her a folder. "Everything in here is yours now," I told her. "I didn't build to be thanked. I built so others don't have to beg." She blinked, eyes wide. "But what do you get out of this?" "Peace," I said, "the kind you don't have to ask permission for." That night, just after I'd poured a glass of wine, another message came through. Subject, you were right. No greeting, no sign-off, no text in the body, Just those words. From my father. I stared at it for a long moment. Too late. But still enough to feel clean. The new studio had glass walls and open ceilings, designed to let the light in, not just physically, but symbolically. Every inch reflected intention, from the exposed beams to the quote engraved on the main door. Legacy is what you build when no one believes you can. I walked in, heels clicking against polished concrete, and smiled. I wasn't rebuilding anymore. I was building out loud. The architect had taken my sketches and made them breathe. I ran my hand along the edge of a custom table near the center, maple and matte black steel. My signature was hidden in the wood grain, carved in microtext near the underside. Not for show. For me. They taught me to hide, I said aloud, voice steady in the echoing space. I taught myself to lead. That evening, a segment ran on the local news. Behind the $900 million woman they tried to erase. The headline hung there for a moment before the anchor continued. My name, full, unabridged, rolled across the bottom of the screen. They talked about Blue Harbor, about the silent partnerships I'd built, the philanthropic investments no one ever knew to credit. For the first time, the narrative wasn't theirs to spin. And now they remember, because now they can't afford to forget. 2 days later, I posted a letter. No drama, no capital letters, just facts. A timeline of what happened, of what I gave, of what they took, of how I recovered. I signed it. Family isn't blood. It's who remembers your worth when there's no applause left. I remember mine. It went viral in less than an hour. And then came the envelope. Delivered by hand. A cream card, gold-trimmed. Valora's handwriting. Restorative brunch, for the sake of reconnection and future harmony. I read it twice, set it down, picked it back up, then fed it through the shredder without blinking. I didn't break bread with people who once tried to starve me of dignity. Instead, that morning, I donated $1 million to an organization for disowned daughters and estranged caregivers. The name of the foundation, not mine. The headline? Quiet. I didn't need credit. I needed impact. Later that month, I stood on stage at a leadership summit in Chicago, speaking to a room full of women who were tired of asking permission to be whole. I told them what I'd learned. That voice telling you to stay small? It's usually not yours. You don't need their permission to matter. Afterward, I passed a billboard on the drive back to the airport. My face wasn't on it, but my words were. And for the first time in my life, I didn't cringe at being seen. At the beach house, I poured a glass of wine and opened the sliding doors. The sky bled lavender. The waves hummed their endless rhythm. I sat on the deck, legs curled under me, laptop dimmed beside me. I didn't lose a family, I whispered. I lost an illusion. And gained myself. The phone buzzed once. A new request. Senator's office. They wanted me to consult on their women's equity fund. I smiled. Now they ask. And I choose.